that of Salvatore Sciarrino's De la Nuit, based on music from Maurice Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit. It was played by Bertrand Chamayou from a new Erato release called Ravel Fragments. I'm James Jolly and welcome to this Gramophone Podcast, which is given in association with Wigmore Hall. And this week there are visits from Gramophone Award winners Helen Charleston and Toby Carr, Stephen Isserlis, Leif Ove Ansnes, and members of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. Full details at the end. Bertrand Chamayou's new album, Ravel Fragments, is his contribution to the celebrations of Ravel's 150th birthday. And when I visited him at home in Paris, the composer was very much on his mind. So you're very much in Ravel mood at the moment. You're about to, I think, is this the second time this year you've performed the complete piano works? You're doing the Philharmonie de Paris concert on Friday.
It will be the third time.
Third time.
Even I did it only in France yet, in Bordeaux and Poitiers as well, which have a very nice theatre. And will be the third time, yes, after 10 years.
And yeah, because it was 10 years ago you recorded the works and they've just come out on
I recorded the works. I played them quite a lot, actually. Even in Paris, I played the complete works at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. So now it will be at the Philharmonie, even a bigger hall. Yeah, but those works have been in my life forever, I would say. The Little Prelude was the first piece I played. And then my goal was to be able to learn the jeu d'eau. So I started when I was basically like 9 or something. And between 9 and 16, more or less, I basically learned every single piece by Ravel. So, and I kept them in my repertoire. I was very, very often playing Gaspard or Le Tombeau de Couperin. So even when I recorded it 10 years ago, I was pretty young, like 33 or something. But the works were, let's say pretty mature. I had a long lifetime with those works. So, but of course, that's works which are so important. My discovery of Ravel's music when I was very young was one of the important milestone in my development. And a few composers like that. I'm of course very much into Debussy, very much into Stravinsky, into a lot of music of that time. But it feels like, in my own word, Ravel is the kind of the sun, and the other ones are the planets which are turning around. It's the way I discovered the music of this time was mainly Ravel. So that's why I think it's a kind of a very strong personal relationship to his music, and probably it will remain forever. And of course, the anniversary is an opportunity, but I couldn't miss it because it's of course something that I will visit again and again during my whole life.
And this new album is a sort of supplement, isn't it? Because you're scooping up a few of the things that don't really fit into the complete piano works, and then you intersperse them with homages and tributes and elegies in memoriam of Ravel. And I think what struck me listening to it is that the affection and also the respect that so many composers had for him, that they would actually write all these pieces.
Absolutely, you're right. It's funny because this idea was not clear. Especially playing a few pieces which were tributes to Ravel, and there are a lot more actually. I for example, Xenakis wrote a piece, and I thought about recording it. Might be something I would do later because there are actually a lot of interesting pieces that I haven't recorded yet. One piece, which is by Salvatore Sciarrino, called De la Nuit. I was thinking that one day I would kind of create a program with pieces which are a kind of portrait, but fragmented portrait, like a cubist portrait. I don't know whatever, but something a little bit transformed. But it was not clear, and honestly, in that case, every time it's funny because I like to write the booklets of my albums all the time, and every time I say the same thing that, of course, in the case of Messiaen, in the case of Liszt, in the case of Ravel, it's things that are coming from my childhood. I was like developing a relationship to those works already very young, and so the album went as a kind of in a logical way. It was a development of this relationship. But in the case of this album was very different. I didn't have this idea very clearly, and it's really thanks to the anniversary But at some point, I felt a little bit ashamed, actually, that I'm doing so much for Ravel and not even to bring an album. And of course, I had the idea of the concertos, and I still have the idea to record them. But also, I had the idea to record the chamber music, the songs, and everything. And for planning reasons with the other interpreters, orchestras, and everything, it was impossible to make it for this year. I didn't find the right timings, I was not sure about with who I would like to do it and everything. So I decided, okay, we will do a new edition of the complete solo works with the vinyl and everything. And in really literally like in September or something, really very recently, this idea of creating a kind of special portrait of the works by Maurice Ravel, but without, in a way, the original work, struck me. First of all, because 10 years ago, when I recorded the complete solo works, one question was whether I should include the transcriptions or not that Ravel made himself, especially of La Valse, which is very often played by a lot of pianists. And also he made 3 fragments from Daphnis et Chloé. And my original plan was actually to include them in this album of the complete works 10 years ago. And at the end, I choose not to put them because, especially of La Valse, which actually exists in a 2-piano version, which I think is the real one in a way.
Because it was an orchestral work first, wasn't it? And then
or
did he make the piano at the same time?
All together, same time.
Okay.
Like he always did, actually. But the 2-piano versions was made exactly at the same time as the orchestral version. And I think this is a very complete transcription. And more or less in the same time, he published this solo version, which is very strange because all Ravel works are so perfect and complete. And this transcription is very weird because actually there is a structure, let's say a bass that you can play at the piano, 2 lines with, let's say, more or less left hand and right hand, which is a kind of structure, a skeleton of the piece. And it sounds like the piece, it's great, but a lot of details are missing, which are giving really the charm of the piece. A lot of elements which are played at the flute or which are decorative, but which are essential. And he actually puts them, but on another line which is unplayable like that. That he didn't really made the work of a person who is supposed to transcribe it. So my question was really, it looks like it's something made for people who would like to accompany the dancer to prepare for the ballet or something. Or maybe it's a kind of a puzzle that he let for the interpreter to make their own transcription. That's basically what everybody does. But coming from Ravel, it's very surprising. So I think it's really something that was made for the ballet. I mean, to work on the ballet.
So what was your approach? Was it basically to try and weave as much from this 3rd stave into the 2-stave music?
Yeah. Like everybody does, more or less, but in a different way. And I tried really to include everything. And of course, it's a kind of it's really acrobatic actually. And I even added a few lines from the orchestra, which were not in the Ravel score. But this idea to bring it, I'm not sure I will even play that in a concert. I will see, but to work on it because it's a kind of little labyrinth. I mean, it's a kind of interesting thing to do. Then I figure out, okay, let's do then the Daphnis as well, which is also not easy to make sound at the piano.
If you listen to this album straight through without paying attention to who's composing it or whatever, it's relatively easy to figure out which is the pure Ravel.
Yeah.
But the Daphnis just kind of, every time you come to a Daphnis excerpt, and I think there are 3 on this album, it just blossoms. It's like it's like all of a sudden somebody turns the kind of colours up, and you're in this incredible world.
Absolutely, yeah. Because the piece is marvelous, and in a way, because 10 years ago I was not sure whether those pieces were sounding really well at the piano to compare to the orchestra, which is normally not the case with Ravel. When you have the orchestral version of the Pavane or the Tombeau de Couperin or Embarque sur l'Océan, Alborada, and everything, you cannot tell that the orchestral version is much better than the piano version. It's two different things, but it works because he was also composing every time from the piano. And I think that makes a big difference, like Stravinsky did. It's very interesting for me to notice that the two maybe best orchestrators of that time were composing from the piano. So it's always sounding at the piano. And honestly, I was a little bit doubtful 10 years ago about Laval's, like it would sound like a reduction, something reduced. And this is not the case. I think even Daphnis is sounding so marvelously at the piano in a way. Of course, very different from the orchestra, and you miss a few details, but still, it's working very well as a piano piece. And so that was the idea, to put those original transcriptions by Ravel, even though you have to make a rework on levels. And also, very often when I am sitting at my piano and I have kind of, after a work session, I'm taking some free time to sight read and everything, and I'm taking scores which are not for the piano. And in the case of Ravel, some melodies or those trois chansons a cappella, and I'm very often doing some my own transcriptions just for pleasure. And in the cases of the three pieces I included that I transcribed myself, that pieces that I'm regularly playing at home, actually. And I thought, let's maybe do that. It's a very intimate thing, because I never thought I would record any transcription by myself or something. But especially the Trois Beaux Oiseaux du Paradis, the opening track, I always loved to play that at the piano, and I thought it was probably basically composed at the piano. So because
it
just works so perfectly. Of course, I had this Sciarrino idea that actually is a very funny thing, because it was the first piece I ever made me think I should record a kind of album like that. And when I decided in September to make this album, I started to search for a lot of pieces which were kind of tributes to Ravel, and I discovered a lot of new ones, including Joaquin Nin, Ricardo Vignes, Betsy Jolas that I chose, for example. There was pieces that I didn't know before, and I kind of made a bunch of pieces, and I chose the few ones, and I forgot about the Sciarrino. Totally. And
we should talk about the Sciarrino, because it's basically, it draws on Gaspard de la Nuit and also the Prélude à la Nuit from the Rhapsody Espagnole to create a sort of night piece. You get little fragments of Ravel pure, and it just sort of comes out.
It's mainly Ravel. It's exactly from Ondine and Scarbo.
Yeah.
It's a mix of the two pieces, and with a kind of continuum in the middle, which is like never interrupted. It's a crazy piece, almost unplayable, but I tried to do my best to have a really accurate version. And I always loved this. I was fascinated by the effect this piece had. And the funny thing that I was about to say, that actually I forgot about it and it's really literally at the last moment, like 3 weeks before the recording, I was touring in US with Barbara Hannigan, and at some point we were talking in the program, and she said, without even knowing about it, does Sciarrino have a piece in Omaggio to? And I was like, my God, it was basically the best possible idea to include that. And I relearned the piece, I knew it, and of course, I had kind of a little advantage that I played the Gaspard de la Nuit so much that basically you have cuts of Gaspard de la Nuit mixed in a different way. But it's not easy to play, I should say. It's quite very, very super virtuosic piece. What I love about it, that for me, it really reveals what this album is about. It's like those fragments. this piece by Chiarino is only fragments from Ravel, which are put together in a different way, and that creates a totally Ravelian sound in a way, but from a different angle, like using the memory and a lot of elements. And this is the case with most of the pieces that I chose, actually. If you take the Betsy Jolas, it's also quotes from Gaspard de la Nuit. The piece by this French composer Frédéric Derieux also, it's quoting the bell of Le Gibet. And at the end, this is the way I choose the piece. For example, I decided not to include the Xenakis piece because it doesn't sound at all like Ravel. It's a very brutal piece. And I wanted that the album, if you listen to it from the first track to the last one, would sound, even if you notice, as you said, clearly that what is pure Ravel music and what is not from Ravel, that in a way it would be kind of seamless. And that you still have a feeling that it's a Ravelian spirit, a Ravelian. There is not a piece which is totally breaking this feeling. So that was a little bit the idea, including the Spanish pieces. But that could, of course, if you think about Alborada and even the Serenade Grotesque, all those Spanish influences that Ravel had. So my idea was really to curate a kind of a program which would sound more or less always like it could be Ravel, or even if it's not Ravel, it's very Ravelian.
But it avoids pastiche. None of these pieces sound like a composer trying to sound like Ravel.
Exactly.
It's sort of done. I mean, for example, the Honegger has that the sort of modal harmonies that is Ravelian, and he does that sort of major ninth over a minor third, which is a very much a Ravelian thing. But it couldn't be by Ravel because it's got a sort of angularity that kind of gives the game away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really the idea that everybody is doing this in its own way. It's not à la manière de Ravel or something. And even, I recorded in my 10 years ago a little à la manière de Ravel by Casella, which is more sounding like Casella than Ravel. It's just quoting something from Valse Noble and Sentimentale. That also shows that it's very difficult to copy.
I think the piece that seems to me that comes across as the most affectionate tribute to Ravel is the Ricardo Vignes piece. You kind of sense listening to it that he knew Ravel and liked him. And actually, more than any of the other pieces, it seems to convey what he felt Ravel was like as a person. There's that precision and there's that quirkiness and then a little sense of humour as well in there.
It's very funny that you mentioned, especially this piece by Ricardo Vignes, because from the whole program, I think it's the only one which is not sounding like the music of Ravel. It's the only piece that is composed really at Ravel's death. And of course, not from a real composer. Let's say Ricardo Vignes didn't compose so many pieces, only those little portraits and everything. And it's very nice, but you can tell it's from a kind of amateur composer. And it's a more Chopinian piece, let's say. But exactly the reason I put it in this album, it's like it seems very sincere, very emotional farewell to Ravel, and it's very, very moving in a way. So I think it tells a story about, and it's maybe the real tribute, which is compared to others. Even Joaquin Nin, of course, it's a kind of little message. They were friends and everything. But in the case of Ricardo Vignes, I think there is something which is more intimate and more personal than any other pieces.
The other work that is interesting in the way that it does pay tribute to Ravel is the Alexander Tanzmann piece by the Polish composer. It's almost as if he went in to try and crystallise the sort of essence of what Ravel was all about, because he's quoted as saying that Ravel helped me develop a sense of economy of means, and you can sort of sense listening to the Tanzmann piece what attracted him to Ravel's music, this sort of clarity, economy, just the sort of precision of expression.
Absolutely, and also in this kind of sense of, let's say, kind of spectral harmony, with this fascination for the bells, which you find in most of the pieces, like La Vallée des Cloches, for example. But what comes out of a pure sound that you play in a certain way in the pedal, and that is freeing up so much overtones and everything, and so creating those complex harmonies that you have typically in the Ravelian harmony, which is so special, with all those sevens and nines and kind of complex chords, which are mainly made with traditional harmony, augmented by kind of overtones. I mean, not as much as Messiaen, but it's already kind of a step between traditional harmony and kind of more modern, the way that Messiaen treated the harmony, of course. And this is typically this kind of research that led, of course, much later to spectral music. But it's already this kind of aspect of trying to build an harmony around the resonance. I mean, how do you make, especially with the piano, it's very interesting that the fact that you have an attack and then the sound is disappearing, that at some point the ear can really figure out and listen to the overtones and build a kind of harmonic structure out of it. And this is very interesting, this piece by Tansman, is very short, but it's all about that, actually, about this bell effect that typically you find so much in Ravel's music, in La Vallée des Cloches, in Oiseau Triste, actually, even if it's supposed to be a bird, but there is something about a resonance, probably heard in the forest when he was listening to the bird with the echo and everything, but also in Le Gibet, for example, how you build complete around only one note, you can build an incredible harmonic word, like a cathedral engloutie, a little bit, something.
I think what's lovely about this record, and in a way it's a similar kind of, I don't know, aesthetic setting from your Sati Cage album, which, yes, you can listen to individual parts of it, but actually if you listen to the whole thing, almost without actually paying attention to what you're listening to, the effect is extraordinary. And it's a kind of tribute to the album, the power of the album in an age where, you know, we're constantly being given little bits of music and little bits here and actually as a whole, it's a very, very powerful experience and a beautiful tribute in Ravel's birthday year, you know, to one of the greatest composers that France has ever produced.
Thank you for that. I mean, this is, of course, my goal. Not that I'm nostalgic, because I really love something about the streaming world, that we can develop also a new relationship to what we listen to, and that's always good to move on. I mean, we need that. Not only being nostalgic, but I always had this kind of passion for curating. That's the way I'm also doing programs for my festival and everything. I really like that, and I'm always searching for new ideas and how to bring things together. And I really believe that what is interesting about an album is the way it's curated. It's of course, you can listen to the pieces detached from that, and you can listen to 2-3 pieces, and you should feel it's a part of a whole experience. In a way, this is something that I don't want to give up with that. Of course, I did a 1-hour program because we are still also releasing the albums physically, so to fit in that. But it could be a 30 minutes program, it could be a 2 hours program, it could be a 3 hours program. And I think more and more I will go in that direction. Like what is important is the main idea, and it's very, very interesting to present the works in a context. It's funny because before I was always doing monography, trying to curate in a very special way. Also, when I recorded the Saint-Saëns Concerto, trying to find a bunch of pieces which were unknown, or when I did very long time ago a Mendelssohn album, trying to find a way to put all together the pieces that I chose. But since I did this Lullaby album, it was my first experience, like in a more conceptual way, let's say. I enjoy very much doing that. I mean, so I think I will sometimes go again. Probably the next project that I will do will be again a kind of important body of work. But sometimes this is, in a way, very recreative for me to create those little albums with small pieces and trying to put kind of gems together, you know. But at the end, I mean, it's it's only like just entertainment or kind of things that should be pleasant. I try to create as a whole musical world, and yes, I enjoy a lot doing those things. I mean, and it's very funny because most of the time I enter in the studio without a clear plan. I have a clear idea of the final result, the type of sound, the type of journey that I want to make, but I need to experience it in the studio and to listen to what I have done to really decide which pieces I keep, because sometimes I record even more pieces, but I don't include them in the album, and in which order and everything.
Did this take a lot of trial and error before you got the order you wanted, or were you fairly clear at the start how it would move?
No, while recording, I mean, it's the whole thing. I mean, this album we did in a very, very fast way, actually. We recorded on 2.5 days during the night and everything. So, and I work in a very special way that people are editing and mixing at the same time, and I'm listening and choosing the takes on the spot, I mean, immediately. So basically, when I move to the next piece, they are editing the piece I just recording before, and at that time there were 4 different people which were each one editing a piece. So after 2.5 days, we basically had a kind of master. We worked on the mix then, and so I listen the same time when I have some breaks, and very quickly the album is revealing in my head the order and how it should be put together. It's very fast in a way.
Because there's
very,
gorgeous
very quick process.
Juxtapositions on the album. I mean, to me, I think the one I love more than anything on the whole album is going from the De la Nuit of Chiarino into the fragments of Daphnis and Chloe. I just love that. It's just...
Yeah, well, this kind of tremolo, which is really about that. And actually, De la Nuit is finishing with the beginning of Ondine. And in a way, also, it's a way to connect all those memories. I mean, that you... And this is why I gave this title of Fragments. I mean, it's coming from the fact that he titled his transcription from Daphnis and Chloe Fragments. But in the same time, when you take this Chiarino pieces, kind of cuts, and when you connect the pieces together, you realize, I mean, there is something which is very close. I mean, this beginning of Ondine, the feeling of the beginning of this fragment from Daphnis and Chloe, it's also a very nocturnal effect with this tremolo. It's a different music, it's a different harmony, but there is something very close in the feeling. It's really about the same thing. So I think it's a way to connect also the pieces between them, which are sometimes have been composed, I mean, 20 years apart from each other. But you can realize that all the memory, something is really always there. And
part of one of the 3 fragments that Ravel transcribed for piano from his ballet score Daphnis et Chloé. The pianist was our guest this week, Bertrand Chamayou, and his album Ravel Fragments is just out from Erato. And if you want to hear him talking about and playing music by Ravel, a new filmed interview I made with him a few weeks ago is just up to view on Medici TV. This Gramophone podcast was made in association with Wigmore Hall, where incidentally Bertrand Chamayou will be appearing alongside Les Fauves Ansnis in 4-hand piano music by Schubert and Kurtag. That'll be on May the 25th, and tickets are available. Artists appearing this week include Gramophone Award winners Helen Charleston and Toby Carr, Stephen Isserlis, Les Fauves Ansnis, and members of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra, as well as Caroline Shaw, the Schumann Quartet, Nevermind, who appeared on a recent Gramophone podcast talking about the work they'll be playing, their own chamber transcription of Bach's Goldberg Variations. That's on Sunday, March the 9th. Florilegium, Eric Liu, and the London Handel Players. For full details, ticket information, and access to the video-on-demand concerts, just go to wigmorehall.org.uk, where you can also book the concerts between now and July. Gramophone podcasts are free, so if you enjoy them, then a really great way to support our work is to take out a subscription to Gramophone magazine. Over 13 issues a year, we bring you hundreds of reviews by our expert critics, as well as in-depth articles about the latest classical music releases and the most exciting musicians of the day. And if you head over to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and enter the code podcast20 in the checkout, you can even get a 20% discount off any subscription package. We really value your support. And consider leaving a review or rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And do look out for another Gramophone podcast very soon.